Turning to geographical trends, we've got shifts which are occurring, and particularly if we look at what's happening in the non-metropolitan regions. Across the developed and the developing world, there are often declining populations in non-metropolitan regions. This is the so-called rural bite, or hollowing out, or with young workers, especially the better educated, who are leaving many rural areas. The residual populations who are there are often the elderly, or children perhaps, who may be sent grandchildren to care for, or orphans may be sent back from metropolitan areas. There's also a hollowing out at the reproductive ages, which also are the working ages, which means that there's lower fertility, fewer children, and this accelerates decline. There may in fact be major problems in servicing health demands in isolated, lower density, declining populations. How do you actually handle that? The costs per client, per patient, go up enormously. In many places, of course, this effect is reinforced by hollowing out of age pyramids at the working ages, and therefore a depleted rural labour force. You may no longer have doctors and nurses there. Older populations are at higher risk ages, of course, and this adds to the burden. And the fact that they're at an older age may mean that they're less able to produce the daily needs in terms of food, and this could have an effect on malnutrition and therefore on malnutrition infection cycles. And this is reinforced, as is happening a lot in Africa, if people who are sick return from the big centres back home for care. Now, what about metropolitanisation, which is the inverse of what I've just been talking about? This attracts young skilled workers, typically the highly skilled. As they're young and at middle ages, there's less exposure to risk of disease. It also attracts the care sector workers. And there's also a focus there on investment in institutions, particularly the more specialised, high cost. Those are going to be in the big metropolitan areas. That's where the money will be invested. So there's a clustering of high-tech services, high-tech workers and so on. There's also far greater expertise in the metropolitan areas. The fact that you've got people in the public health service who've got much higher turnover, much more frequent, higher numbers of patients and so on, much more throughput, means that these people have got much more chance of maintaining their skills. But inversely, and let's not forget this, these same agglomerations may produce slums. They may have huge, deprived and marginal populations. Visit a city like Cape Town, which is a beautiful city, which has super beaches and so on, incredibly wealthy areas, and yet a few kilometres from there, huge areas of poverty, enormous cities laid out almost, populations towards 1 million people living in areas which are deprived by comparison with what is a few kilometres away. Now, servicing the more deprived, of course, means you've got to channel more investment into the metropoli, and these are already favoured areas for the other sectors. In many countries, agglomerations are growing with higher and higher percents of the population clustered there. And this can become more extreme if a country's geography is difficult. Take the case of Norway, or my own country, New Zealand. Both of these are long, mountainous, developed countries, but with the population clustered in one major metropolitan zone, Oslo in the case of Norway, Auckland in the case of New Zealand. So this raises major issues of accessibility. 1/3 of all New Zealanders live in one city, right in the north of the country.